it's Ashley, and today we're going to be talking about Scythe by Neal Shusterman, which, one, I read on audiobook, so I don't have the physical copy with me right now to hold and to swing around while I rant about how great this book was. Two, this was one of the best books that I've read so far this year, if not the best book I've read so far this year. And three, I don't have any notes whatsoever for this book. So, we're gonna be flying by the seat of my pants here. So, if you did not already know, or did not watch my Reading Rush vlogs to find out, I recently read Scythe by Neal Shusterman. This was a month-long process for me. I started the beginning of 2020 maybe, but also maybe like in 2019, I don't remember. So after months of listening to this book, I finally got through it. And holy shit, I just cannot explain to you how much I loved this book. This book was so much better than I thought it was going to be. Like when you first read the synopsis, you think it's some weird dystopian story that's really been bent on its head because it's more of a utopia, but there's also going to be these sort of elements that are going to make it not so perfect as it seems. But oh, I love this book so much. There's gonna be a lot of screaming in this video, I am just warning you now. So essentially, we have, like I said, this utopian world. The people in this world have conquered everything. They've conquered death, basically. If somebody dies, they can just be regenerated and brought back. If somebody reaches old age, they can just regenerate back to whatever age they want. So essentially, people can live forever. But this means overpopulation, this means habitat destruction for animals and things like that, global warming, that kind of thing. So they created the scythes, and the scythes are essentially in charge of killing. They choose who dies and when they die and how they die. This brings along a whole other topic that I will love to get into in this video because it's one of my favorite things to read about in books, but I won't go too much into detail on that now. First, I'm gonna say that we follow Citra and Rowan, who are two younger kids. They're, I don't even know how old they are. This is a YA, so they're like 16, 17, I don't know. They're both in school, they're both just living their lives or whatever, and somehow both of their paths cross with Scythe Faraday. And the story follows Citra and Rowan as they become Scythe Faraday's apprentices, and they sort of compete against one another to see who will become the scythe in the end. Now, when I said there was like a whole other side of this that I wasn't going to get too much into now, this is the whole idea that by not wanting to be a scythe, by not wanting to kill people, you are essentially the best person for the job. And I will leave it there because I'm not going to get into any more of that in the non-spoilery section. You need to read this book if you haven't, because then you will understand exactly what I'm talking about. I will say before I get into all of the spoilers and all of the things that I do want to talk about that mostly just fly out of my head at once because, like I said, I don't have notes for this, so this is not going to be structured in any way whatsoever. I do want to say that I loved Citra and Rowan. I loved how different but also similar they were to each other. I loved their sort of progression through it. Rowan really scared the shit out of me 90% of this book. As soon as that pivotal moment happens and Citra goes this way and Rowan goes this way, I just was, oh, I was so scared for Rowan. Oh my gosh. I love the world. I love the characters. I love the ending. The ending was everything. If you read this book and you don't like 90% of it, just get to the end. Oh my god, I loved it so much. But with that being said, that's all I'm gonna say. Read this book, come back when you have, and listen to my rants about how much I loved this thing, and then we can talk about this together. So goodbye, non-spoilery people. Go read this book, please. Please. Okay, so now that we're in the spoilers, let's see if I can figure out what to talk about without notes. To be honest, the beginning of this book is pretty fuzzy to me because, like I said, I read it months ago. So from what I remember, Citra and Rowan were just kind of living their lives. I really loved Rowan's mindset when he thought that he was the lettuce of the, like, family. He was just the lettuce of the world, meaning in a sandwich, the lettuce is the soggiest, grossest part that if you pull it out, it will still be a sandwich. He thought that he was the lettuce of the sandwich, which I thought was a great metaphor for like what he was feeling in life. And it constantly comes back throughout the book, so I really liked that. And I loved Citra and how just like headstrong she was throughout the entire thing. She was not about to give up her morals no matter what happened, and I really loved that for her. When I said that Rowan was scaring the shit out of me, I hope that you know that I'm talking about the point where Scythe Goddard takes him on, and then he starts to like lose touch with his morality and starts to understand how they could actually like killing people and like being a scythe, because at that point when he was just like slicing through people and killing people, I was like, oh my god, my child, my baby, please do not do this. Don't go down this path, child. I need you. I was so fucking scared for him. Oh my god. So anyway, something that I really loved about this was the world building, because essentially the world is just our world, but it's like on steroids pretty much. It's like our world, but we've gotten rid of all of the bad stuff that could ever have happened. The scythes and the way that they were like formed and what they do was honestly the most interesting and most captivating part of this story. There's just so much that went into being a scythe and what it means to be a scythe and having that power, which is what I really, really loved about this story the most. Was just so interesting to read about and to kind of turn over in your head and really think about. I absolutely love themes and stories where power corrupts. It was one of my favorite things to write about when I was in high school. Like 90% of my literature papers that I would write would just be about like power corrupting and how when an individual has too much power, that individual ends up losing morality and ends up, you know, going on the path of destruction and yada yada yada. And so that was what I really, really loved and took away from this story. The story was like that theme, like completely encapsulated in one book. It was so wonderful. I mean, it was scary, don't get me wrong, it was so scary because this shit happens in real life. I mean, look at the US political system, okay? The scythes, they have the power in this case. They have power over death. They are the only people in this world who can kill people and keep them dead. And you see how that power corrupts people inside Goddard and his followers. You see that they think of themselves as godlike, and they think that they should be able to do whatever they want with it because, you know, they have this power. They should be able to control it however they like. Scythe Faraday, Scythe Curie, and Citra, and essentially Rowan as well, are what happens when that power is not corrupted, because you have to have empathy in order to be able to sustain that. And that's something that I've always thought of as like a theme in most circumstances where a lot of power is involved. If you're not able to have compassion and to empathize with whatever you have power over and understand how that power, you know, you need to use it and wield it in a way that is not going to destroy everything that's been built, then that power will end up corrupting you. Even in the real world, even in our world today, there are just individuals and people who they garner enough power and they lose sight of their morals and what's right and what's wrong, and they end up just, you know, becoming selfish and really doing all of these things that will, you know, better themselves and better their standing. I mean, look at the US political system. Look at the president, you know? So like, it's completely evident in the modern day today, and that's something that I really just love that about this book. I'll shut up about that now, but I could not get over that the entire book. Okay, that's it. That's all I was gonna say. Plot-wise, I don't know if there's a whole lot that I want to say. I really loved the way that this story went. The beginning was honestly pretty slow. The beginning was a lot of introductory into scythedom, into what it means to be a scythe and how they operate. And then the second half of the book was really like what's wrong with the scythedom and what's wrong with how they operate and that kind of thing, which I loved that there was a clear distinction between one and the other, especially when it came down to Rowan's path throughout this book. Something that really confused me and still kind of confuses me to this day is the Thunderhead, which I know is the title of the second book, so I'm sure that it has more of a role to play in that story. But the Thunderhead was really confusing to me. It's essentially this like AI system that, you know, is kind of like the Cloud, but like turned into AI, meaning it like has autonomy and it like has a mind that thinks of it by itself, and there's even a scene in this story, obviously, when Citra talks to the Thunderhead. I was just a little confused as to how it operated and what exactly it was and how it came to be, but I'm sure I'll know more in the next book, especially because that's the title of the book, and also I'm sure it was because I listened to it on audiobook over the course of a couple months, so I just kind of lost that, like whenever they explained it, I just kind of like lost track of that. I also recently saw this book on a list of fantasy books with no romance in it, and I do have to say that I don't really agree with that, while at the same time also sort of kind of agreeing with it. The romance was definitely not a big part of this book in particular, and I don't know if that gets bigger over the course of the stories. I definitely felt it at times. There was definitely like a romantic tension throughout it all with Citra and Rowan, and I did want something to happen, and I don't know whether I'm like happy or sad that it didn't end up happening, or at least in the way that I wanted it to. I really need to get the physical copy of the book and really like reread it and like look at at everything so that it like is burned into my mind. But regardless, I know that the romantic tension was there. I just don't remember how much there was and whether it was like clearly written on the page in a like scene or not. Oh, okay, and the last thing that I wanted to mention before I go, because I couldn't remember if there was anything else I wanted to talk about, I wanted to talk about the end, because the end of this book was just like, oh my god. Oh my god, one of the best endings to any book I've ever read. Like, honestly, that video that I made about series finales, like, I would put this one in there even though this isn't the series finale ending. It's just... I love this so much. If you don't remember, essentially, Citra and Rowan are at the conclave or whatever the meetings are that the Scythes have every season or every 3 times a year or whatever it's called. And at this point, Rowan had already killed Goddard and like everybody else, which was such an amazing part of this story. Like, let's be real, that was one of the best parts, even though I was like, Rowan, boy, like, don't kill anybody else, but at the same time I was like, kill these people. But anyway, so he had already killed them, he was kind of shunned from the scythedom or whatever, so you knew that he wasn't gonna get picked for it. So they went up and Citra was picked, and they both had these ideas, because the whole thing was whoever won, they had to glean the other person. But you know that they both were not going to glean each other. Like, you know that that was not going to happen. So I was like so waiting for something like really, really wonderful to happen, and it did, and it was beautiful, and it had me literally like giggling in my bed, like for 5 minutes after I read this scene, because it just made me so happy that they actually went against the scythedom rules and like really like stuck it to them. It made me so beyond happy. What ended up happening was Citra went to go glean Rowan, but instead she like took her ring hand, the hand that her ring was on, and she punched him in the face as like a getting back at you for taking me down in the second round. And she forced him to like kiss her ring, which gave him immunity for a year, so she couldn't glean him, and it was so wonderful. It was the best scene that I've read in such a long time. So then she tells Rowan there's like a car waiting for him out back, and he runs out and goes and gets in it, and it's Scythe Faraday driving the car, and I was like, oh my god, could this scene get any better? Oh, it was so good. And then, oh god, the very, very, very end of the book, when she's Scythe Anastasia and people are calling him Scythe Lucifer, and it is wonderful. And that's Scythe, everybody. Oh my god, my face hurts from smiling so much. So yeah, if you have any thoughts as to what happened in this story, please let me know down below, because I'd love to hear and talk a little bit more about it. But also, please don't spoil me for the rest of the series. I'm like begging you. Like, normally I don't care about being spoiled, it's not the end of the world, but this series is like, I don't want to know what happens at all. I want to go into it all on my own, so please don't spoil me. But I would love to talk about this book in particular with you, so definitely let me know down below how you felt about it, and let me know if you agreed or disagreed with any of my thoughts. This book would have been a great book to write about in a high school paper, so if anybody's in high school or college and you're in a literature class and you get to write about any book, highly recommend picking this book, because it's like, it would be very easy to write a paper on. So that's gonna be it for this video, you guys. If you want to follow me on any of my social medias, all the links are in the description below. But other than that, thank you so much for watching this and my crazy ramblings, and I will catch you later. Goodbye!